And get them interested from nothing.
Yeah, then I just didn't like rejection. And to be a door-to-door salesman, you have to be able to let rejection just roll off your back, because you're going to get rejected a lot.
Yeah.
You're interrupting someone's day. If you're doing it to a business people are like generally got a million things going on.
I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
This is always annoying to ask, but if you're liking this content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way for us to get more followers and more people engaged in this great business content. You can also follow us on all socials at TurtlesmithOK and find us at turtlesmith.com.
What's up, man? Back for another one?
Yeah, we are here again.
Yeah. This week we're talking about cold calling, which is the thing I hate the most about any business venture. Cold calling is difficult. It is embarrassing sometimes, cringy, but you got to do it. It's one of the most powerful sales techniques amongst most industries, in my opinion.
If you have a really good pitch.
Well, regardless, even if you don't have a good pitch, you still got to get in front of customers, so you better figure it out.
No, but I'm just saying that to be really effective, though, you need to have all your stuff, your information down, and you need to be able to present it in a really engaging way, because you're basically walking into someone's life who didn't expect you to be there, and most likely doesn't want you there. Yeah,
and that's why, the very first phase in our how to make a business plan is starting to talk about the elevator pitch, because you need to start thinking about that first and keep working on it throughout your whole planning model, because it's so important. You got any good cold calling stories?
I do have a couple, actually.
Yeah, well, lay one on us.
All right. Well, the first one is kind of dark a little bit, but it in hindsight, it's also a little bit humorous.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day, I used to drive around the country with a box truck full of cases.
Yeah.
And I would rent a truck, and then we would build shelving inside of it to make it easy to get the cases and do a presentation wherever we went.
Oh, so it's like a whole mobile showroom in the back, right?
Yeah. And so I was driving through Oklahoma City, and I had called a place here called Amini's Galleria. They're still in business, by the way. I don't know. There might be someone there who still remembers this. I don't know. But anyway, basically, I was driving around the country, and I just had essentially a printed version of the Yellow Pages with all the billiard places. So every time I was heading towards a city, I would just start calling and trying to set up appointments. And so I set up an appointment, right? And I get there, and as was my habit, I'm backing the truck up to the building and getting ready to get out and go in. And before I even open up the truck, I just want to go in and introduce myself. So I walked inside, and there's nobody there, and I looked around, and I see that there's a group of people huddled in the farthest corner away from the door.
Yeah.
And I walk over to them, and they're visibly upset, And we'll come to find out that this was about a month after the Oklahoma City bombing.
Oh, no.
And the bomber had used a Ryder truck, a yellow Ryder truck.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. Yeah. Ryder having a little bit of a PR problem after that incident.
Yeah, I think Calvin just said that they switched their color to white so that they would no longer be associated with that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to imagine you did not make a sale.
Unfortunately, I did not make a sale that day. I don't think it was because of that, but
it certainly didn't help.
I think it would be harder to complete your sale if you're cold calling and the first thing you do is strike fear into the hearts of everyone in the building.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, the only way to really get good at cold calling is just repetition, getting your pitch down, and really knowing how to turn no's into yeses. So we're going to watch a little video.
Easier said than done.
I think Calvin's got a video for us of a guy who's got a good pitch. Let's see.
This guy's funny.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing? I'm shooting just a black man with a suntan. You must
We're
be
not interested.
Yeah, my mom told my dad that, but 9 months later I was born. But can I say one thing? You would agree black is beautiful, right?
Okay.
just not on your floor. You see this aluminum right here that's blacker than my mother, not as beautiful?
Yes.
Guess what she said when I turned 18?
What?
She said if it's darker than me and it don't pay bills, it shouldn't be there, right?
Right.
They ain't calling you and tell y'all stopping by?
No.
No wonder I ain't see the red carpet. Good friends, hard to find. Look at this right here. Look, you gonna spray this spray and you never remember the day this thing went away. How long y'all been in business? Because they said y'all upgraded like Beyonce.
A year.
See, y'all should adopt me so I can get off work. Add a little color to the neighborhood. I sleep standing up and I come potty train because they've been working me like I'm black and paying me like I'm Mexican. That's why I'm trying to get off work. Now, I ain't Jesus Christ, but look how I just split that like Moses did the Red Sea. Would you say that's shiny like a baby hiney?
It is.
Now, they call me Wild Earth for looking for dirt. Jesse James looking for stain. You know you can use it on her Travis Scott's too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why Kylie Jenner got some. But the good part about it, look, watch this. Don't panic, it's organic. She's like, don't touch me. Look, watch this. You gonna spray this on here? You can use it on kids' shoes. What y'all do here?
It's a beauty bar, so we do hair, lashes.
Oh, so you do hair with tequila? You said a beauty bar.
No.
Okay. And then look, use it on the floor too. Look at this. Oh my God. Dang. You can do the chubby checker to it. Where I'm from, they call it the stanky wig.
Oh.
Look at that. Paint me green, call me a pickle. Look at that. That's whiter than Sammy Sosa in a snowstorm.
Okay.
I'm impressed. I think I should buy me a bottle. What you think?
I would agree.
Is your shoes comfortable?
They are.
Can you run in your pocket and get the money? I'm right here and do the paperwork.
How much is it?
Well, it's only $19.95. You call me that's the get rid of me special.
Oh.
High five. Yeah, you should get one so that way you and the husband can treat it like a banana and split it because it's unisex. It's made for a woman strong enough for a man like Secret Deodorant.
Okay.
Because the shop on the corner, they said their wife name ain't Sharon.
Well, now that guy had an answer for everything.
Yeah, I mean his style is you know he basically just runs over him and just keeps him laughing.
Yeah.
You know, which is good. So, I mean, he's obviously someone who's figured out how to get his foot in the door and stay there.
Well, this is a great example of like a door-to-door sales guy, which we had talked about before. It's kind of a sales technique that's going out of style, and this is this kind of I guess technique is the best word for it, where you're kind of making them laugh and talking a lot and running over them. It's very common in like an old school sales technique. And when you go through a lot of these sales courses or classes, they'll teach you a little bit about that, how to kind of put people on their back foot, get them laughing, catch them off guard. And it kind of helps build a relationship where you can eventually build a sale. But it takes a really unique type of person to be able to do this. I could never do that. I'd feel so embarrassed and cringy about hustling like that.
It took me a long time to be able to be able to do that. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I grew up in the flea market, and the difference in growing up in the flea market, you got to learn how to hustle too, and you got to learn how to talk to people, and you got to learn how to you literally have to learn, how to turn, turds into chocolate ice cream.
Right.
Because we used to go buy like boxes of literal junk, for $2 or $3 a box. And then we'd be at the auction until like midnight. And then we'd be at the flea market at 4 or 5 in the morning, putting all that stuff out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we wouldn't even know what we had.
Right. Till it was time.
And my mom would walk away. She'd go looking at, she'd want to go to all the other vendors and find stuff that she could get a hold of, that she thought she could sell. So it would leave me there for the first couple hours just selling all this crap.
Yeah.
And I got pretty good at it, at engaging with people. But I found out later that if I tried to go in, even like I tried some door-to-door sales and I was terrible at it.
Yeah?
Yeah. And here's why. Because at the flea market, I was in a fixed location and people came to me.
Right.
So they stopped. Then we had an opportunity to start engaging in conversation. I'd already had a little bit of, practice in talking about anything that was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it worked in that situation.
Yeah.
But if I were the one that had to go and go to someone who didn't want me there,
yeah, and get them interested from nothing.
Yeah, then I just didn't like rejection. And to be a door-to-door salesman, you have to be able to let rejection just roll off your back because you're going to get rejected a lot.
Yeah.
You're interrupting someone's day. If you're doing it to a business people are like generally got a million things going on. They got people calling them, and
Yeah, well, and oftentimes if you're going to a business, you have to get through the gatekeeper before
Right.
you can even talk to the person who makes decisions.
That's
so
right.
not only do you have to make a cold call to get to the guy, then you got to make another one to actually get the sale.
Right.
So it's a difficult process.
It is.
And that video we watched is kind of an extreme example of a cold call, but it has some good kind of techniques in there. I think making them laugh a little, put them at ease. It does help.
Self-deprecation works a lot. He uses a lot of that. He makes kind of the jokes about his mom kicking him out at 18. And,
Yep.
And it does work to kind of put people at ease.
Yeah.
I have never liked any salesperson who's been arrogant. I especially don't like them when they're arrogant and they're ignorant about their own product.
Yeah, well, that's really the key. Is you have to be an expert in your product, which is why step 2 of our build your business plan phase is become an expert.
I am, however, a sucker for a good salesman. I'm one of the people who bought like a Hoover vacuum.
Yeah, you've told that before. Yeah,
I can't $1,400 when I didn't have $1,000 in the bank.
Yeah, but only what 30 easy payments of $80.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It took us a couple of years to pay that vacuum off, but we finally did, and now I'm making sure it gets used in the new building for sure. We're using this damn thing. I don't care.
Still working, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's check out this question. Is cold calling still worth it in 2025? Cold calling has been around forever, but with AI-powered outreach, email automation, and LinkedIn prospecting, is it still effective in 2025? Some sales pros swear by it, while others say cold email and social selling have completely taken over. Personally, I've seen better results with cold email, especially when using Success AI to target verified leads. It ensures I'm reaching decision makers instead of wasting time on bad data, but I know some industries like real estate and high-ticket B2B still prefer phone calls over emails. One advantage of cold calling is immediacy, and you get real-time feedback, objections, and insights that emails can't provide. But the downside, gatekeepers, voicemails, and the sheer amount of rejection. To make calls more effective, I use warm introductions from LinkedIn connections. What are your thoughts on this new kind of AI, cold email, social media stuff?
My thought is the more of this AI that comes on board, the more that we try to outsource the
hard parts of our jobs,
the beginning of the relationship with prospects.
Yep.
The more that people are going to reject being sold by a robot, and the more that they are going to value a human connection.
Yeah. Now, I will say that cold calling versus cold emails or automation at some point, I think there really is some kind of curve to the graph of price versus how effective cold calling is, especially for your business. If you're selling a low ticket item and you need to move high volume, cold calling does not work for you. But if you have a very high ticket item that you're selling, or like a very large software package or a very large piece of real estate, cold calling is really the only way to get those things done. And so I think because you have to build a good relationship in order to be able to sell kind of higher priced items, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're a low volume seller, like you're maybe only making 5 or 6 sales a year, like a big real estate developer would do. Those are all in-person phone calls, and then emails later once the relationship is built.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I just it's really difficult sometimes to just figure out how to start when you call them up and you say, "Hey, I'm so and so, and I'm this is what I've got to offer." And obviously, the gatekeepers and some, like you said, it's hard to get through those sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and we're not really getting into techniques that much here. Yeah. There is so much information out there on YouTube for like different ways you can do cold calls, different techniques to kind of put people, catch them off their guard or get them laughing or build the relationships. Really, you just got to kind of find what works for you, and you got to get rejected a lot.
Now, maybe I'm wrong about this, what I'm going to say, but let me preface it with this. I had when my mom had a boyfriend, and he ran a sales call room. They called it a boiler room back in the day, mm-hmm. where they would just be making cold calls all day. They were selling lawn care. Yeah, it was True Green lawn care they were selling.
Yeah,
And as a kid, I had to he paid me like a little bit of money to make motivational poster signs, and put them up all over the thing. But I've always remembered that, how the absolute sheer frequency of calls that these folks were making, and they had to read off of a script and everything.
Yep.
And as I got older, of course, now I have my own business and my own, I'm a homeowner and everything. And now I get calls all the time. And I think back to those days when I was with him and how much that those people had to make calls. And it was stressful because they were getting rejected left and right. But they were getting enough yeses, to keep the business going.
Yeah.
So as an adult, though, and as a business owner, I'm getting cold called all the time from people trying to lend me money. I'm getting called, from people trying to sell me this or that. And the one thing that really bothers me sometimes is they don't even take a little bit of time to figure out what it is that we do.
Yeah.
And
because they're just trying to get, a quantity over quality calls.
Exactly. And that just now I understand why there's so many rejections, in this is they just want to get to that one person that gives them a little bit of extra time and says, okay, tell me more.
Yep.
And it just, it infuriates me though sometimes, that every time I hear, is the business owner there? I'm like, nope.
Yeah, hang up.
Yeah. I mean, like do, 2 minutes of research and find out, what we do.
Yeah.
If you open with, hey, I see you make pool cue cases, I'm listening.
Well, and that's kind of harkens back to what I was just saying about, the sales price of the item versus the amount of effort that you can put into it. Like if I'm only selling, 10 or 20 items a year, or maybe trying to get 10 or 20 clients, that's what we shoot for. We try to get 1 or 2 clients a month. I can take the time to look them up on Google, learn a little bit about their business before they come into a meeting, and I can have a better conversation with them, And I almost always try to start it by saying, hey, I saw you do this. It's a really cool. Like we had a restaurant come in and I go, man, I looked up your guys' website. This meal in particular looked amazing. And, that shows them right away that we put in a little effort.
Absolutely.
But if I was trying to sell, a $50 item or a $100 item, and I had to call 300 people a day, you just couldn't have the time to put the effort into it.
Yeah, and that's fully understandable, and that's perfectly logical. It makes perfect sense, and I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying out there, if you're somebody out there trying to sell me super high interest loans,
take 2 seconds.
Take those 2 seconds if you really want my business.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if you put a little bit of extra effort into your cold calls, they tend to work better.
Or the things,
especially when you're first starting out.
Yeah, and this is a little bit off the subject of cold calling, but I went looking for like a business phone service, like an internet-enabled business phone service. And I'm not going to mention a brand, but a lot of these, they're like fill out this form and someone will call you. Right?
Yeah, I hate that. I wish I could just have all the information I need right there. Why do I need a call?
Exactly. But sometimes you need these services and you're like, well, I really would like to know what they offer, right?
Yeah.
And they have a form and it says, what's your business, this, that, and the other, and they ask you all your questions. And then the guy calls me and doesn't know anything about my business.
He didn't read it all, anything.
And worse than that, he didn't know anything about his business.
Yeah.
And I was just asking simple questions that I already had answers to on the internet, that I wanted to know if his company did those things.
Yeah.
He didn't even know what those things were. And I was like, this conversation's over, because if there's one thing I know you should know, it's how to answer these simple questions.
You got to be an expert in your product if you're going to sell
Exactly. It. So, I was already put off by the fact that he couldn't even read the intake form that I filled out.
Yeah.
So basically what we're saying is that if it makes sense, if you're trying to sell a high ticket item or a service or a subscription to something, if you have the time to find out about a little bit more about your client, to show them that you care, do that.
Yeah, particularly if you have a good lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't waste those leads.
This next question, what do you say in the first 30 seconds of your cold calls? I'm curious and keen to learn what your success stories look like in your cold calls. We know that we have a very small window to grab our prospects' attention in the first 30 seconds. So what do you sell, and what do you say to grab their attention? What do you say to grab their attention?
I say to someone, if it's like, let's just say, for example, that I'm walking up to a person in the pool room, right? And I'm, for whatever reason, I want to talk to them about their case. We'll liken this to a cold call, right?
Yeah.
I'll say something like, do you like your pool cue?
Yeah.
And of course everybody's going to, most people are going to say yes, and then I'll ask them about it a little bit, and I'll say, do you consider that to be an investment in your game, right? And then they'll say yes. And I say, well, then how much is it worth to you to really protect it?
And see, I think that's the key. In the first 30 seconds, you're asking them 3 questions before you're even talking about your product.
Right.
That's a great technique to start with. And I think not enough sales guys are curious. They just want to get their spiel out and yell at you and tell you what they have, and then hope that you buy it rather than be curious and learn.
Right. And you have to do something like that, because if people detect these days when you call them up and it's right away a script, they know it. It feels fake. It feels inauthentic. It feels like you're just a number. And most of the time that's when people are like, I don't have the time. Take me off your list.
Yeah. Now, it's been a long time since I've done a proper cold call, calling a client that I knew I did the research on, but had never heard of me, was not referred, was not interested in accounting. But, my first 30 seconds of cold calls typically is just saying, I'm blank, I'm Scott Hess. This is what I do, and this is my company. And are you looking good on your accounting? Do you need any help? Is there something that you could be doing better? Asking them a couple questions to get started. But most of my calls now are people who have been referred or know me or I know that are looking for accounting. And so really my first question is just, how can I help you be more successful? What can I do for you to help you out?
Right.
And asking those kind of initial questions is the key for me anyway.
I think that's most important. It's like, what do you need?
Yeah.
I'm here to solve a problem. These are the skills I have. What do you need?
Yeah.
And surprisingly, a lot of people will say something. They'll say, I do actually need some help with my accounting, or I do need some help with figuring out where I'm losing money.
Yeah. I think some of the best success I've ever had is just saying, and what I would tell anybody is just, you say, my name's X, I do Y for Z companies, so I'm Scott Hess. I do accounting and taxes for small businesses, and just kind of introduce yourself very quickly, and then try to ask some questions about their business, try to find out what they're doing, be curious about what they're doing, and, kind of work in where you can fit in and help them.
Right. I
Quickly.
think that's great. I just remembered something about the Hoover vacuum guy.
Yeah.
So at the time that he came, we had our kids were small, right? So that they were like, I think 2 and 6.
Yeah.
And I remember very clearly one thing that he did was he had some kind of a jar or something with he said like, this contains pathogens or something.
And you just threw it on your carpet?
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
He was like, do you want this to be in your kids, food, or do you want them crawling around in this? And then he did a vacuum thing where he showed all the crap that came up with it.
Yeah.
And I remember that me and Lulu were like looking at each other because the Chinese people are very like they keep their places spotless, all the time, and they're very keen about their kids not catching anything.
Right.
Like, it can be like 80 degrees outside and you're dressed in like 6 layers. You go outside looking like a ball.
You're not being cold.
Yeah, no, never. So I remember him doing that and how effective that was, So
Yeah.
I would say that if you have some sort of an example in the first 30 seconds or something like that, where it will solve a problem, that could be cool.
That's a good one. Yeah. I also like to kind of throw in there at the beginning too, like, I would appreciate the opportunity to be able to help you. And if you kind of frame it as like, this is a big deal for you, it sets them off guard a little bit, and they're like, well, maybe, you know?
So for us, what I do is I tell people, I say, the reason I got into this is because my cue fell out of a pool cue case and it broke my heart.
Yep.
And it took a long time for it to come back from the repair. And so while it was gone, I wanted to learn how to build a better case.
Yeah.
So now I would really appreciate it if you would give me the opportunity to protect your cue.
Yeah. You know, when we were doing a little research on this, one of the funnier techniques I saw is the guy would call up businesses and he'd be a little confused. So he'd use like a lot of ums and like a little bit of confusion. And so then it gets them curious on the other end of the phone. And that kind of helps you get in the door. So he kind of be like,
see that one.
he'd be like, hey, you know, I'm Scott, and you know, I'm looking for Joe or something like that, the owner, and you know, I was thinking maybe we could do this, and it kind of gets the person on the other end curious. I don't know if that works for real, but it was an interesting thought to kind of when I hear people say, "Can I speak to the business owner? I want to talk about XYZ," then I'm just like, I just hang up. You know, but if somebody would call and be a little confused on the phone, it would make me confused. And so I'd be like, okay, how can I help you? You know, and then I would probably listen to the rest of their pitch, you know?
Yeah. And you know, there's honestly no magic formula for this.
Well, you just got to find what works for you.
And the thing is I think if I had something to say about that, I sold these specialty cues called jump cues. And they work really well.
Jump cues is where you like the short ones, right?
It's
it
a
makes
shorter
the ball jump.
cue, and it's engineered a little bit differently, so it really makes the art of jumping a pool ball over another pool ball fairly easy with the right technique. Okay,
Yeah.
They don't do it by themselves, but they facilitate it.
Yeah.
So what I tell people, it's like chalk, right? So chalk creates friction, which allows you to put spin on the ball.
Yeah.
So before chalk, you know, we had people who were just really straight and accurate, but they could only use the middle of the ball or very, very little side spin, because anything out on the edges of the ball, the cue would slip off and it would miscue, right?
Yeah.
So with the invention of chalk, it made it where everyone can now apply side spin and just expanded the range of shots that were available in pool.
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
And jump cues sort of do the same thing, right? They're engineered so well these days that almost all of them are great. They almost all make the shot easier to perform, but you still have to learn the techniques to really excel at it, right? So when I started selling them, I thought to myself, I need to teach myself how to use these things, and I need to develop a routine so I can be competent, right?
Yeah. Show them off a
Because
little.
I don't want people to think that the cue doesn't work because I'm not good enough to show them the full range, you know? So in that sense, I became like the vacuum salesman.
Yeah, became a little expert in
I became an expert
jumping
in
cues.
it, and I could show people how it worked in different situations. But here's what I learned. It wasn't enough to just demonstrate it, right? Because the next thing that people wanted to do was they wanted to grab it and try it.
Yeah.
And I realized that a lot of people just didn't have the skill or the technique to do it. Even good players.
So not only do you have to be able to do it, you have to be able to teach somebody to do it.
Exactly. But not only do I have to be able to teach them, I had to develop about 6 different ways to teach them.
Yeah.
Like seriously, like I had to develop all these ways to explain the same thing, but in different ways.
Well, everybody learns differently.
So getting back to your point about, you know, finding what works for you, it's not always about finding what works for you. It's also about finding what works for your customer or your prospect.
That's a great point.
So how you can adjust your approach and instantly pivot too when you see that something's not working.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
So,
well, any final thoughts on cold calling?
My only final thought on that is you really, really, really have to prepare yourself to hear a lot of no's and not take it personally.
Yeah, you got to get comfortable with rejection.
But you have to really be introspective and be humble and understand that sometimes, you know, whatever pitch you're giving, you might be coming off, you know, really abrasive to someone. And so when you get rejected, sometimes you might think to yourself, well, it's not me, it's them, but it might really be you.
Yeah, you got to be humble and put the ego aside when you're
Yeah.
getting good at it, and just
So-
deal with the rejection.
And understand that the very best of the best who do this have a very low yes rate.
Yes,
Just because
yeah.
you're intruding on people's lives.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
even the best sales guys are not batting 1,000.
Yeah.
You know? Absolutely not. Well, I would say that even in 2025 and in the years to come, as AI gets better and more things are becoming automated, the art of being good at a cold call should not go to waste. If you're a small business owner, you should know how to do a cold call. You should know how to sell your product. You should not rely solely on AI or automation or social media. You've got to get good at it.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about literally calling, right?
Well,
not
even-
showing up,
even
not
just-
door-to-door sales.
Not even cold calling, just networking. Like networking to me is a form of cold calling. Getting in front of other business owners or your suppliers or talking to new suppliers or new vendors, you've got to be able to do that cold call.
Yeah, anytime where you need to introduce yourself to
Yeah.
people, you need to come up with what is going to be a good introduction that is warm and genuine and inviting
Yep.
and not abrasive. But what I was going to say there is that I'm just going to reiterate that I think that the human connection between people is going to get even more valuable.
I agree. Yeah.
But-
as things get more separated.
Where I think that AI might come into play here, where it really can be a help to this, is to give you information about your client. So we go back to the idea of taking a few moments to learn about it. What if AI, as I'm walking up to a house, now people are going to find this to be intrusive, but everybody knows that there are databases now. Walmart allegedly has a bigger database on people than the FBI does.
Right.
So we all know that there are certain information that can be gleaned. You got to kind of be like Sherlock Holmes, right?
Yeah.
As you're walking up to a house, you can obviously see what the house, is probably worth. You can check out the cars, you can check out the lawn, and see what the condition is. And there are clues that you can pick up. But imagine if you had not only that, what your senses are telling you, but also you had an AI assistant inside who was telling you, hey, this is, Mr. and Mrs. Jones live here. They have a $375,000 income.
Now that would be, I don't even know, intrusive, but pretty nice for sales to door-to-door sales guys.
Well, I mean, I think that
Or
if you're
just cold
going to
calling.
use AI, then that would be one place where AI could really,
you know what? I think that might be a business you just gave away. Somebody generating.
I'm
that
sure
kind of
somebody's
AI
probably already
database.
thought about it.
I'm sure, yeah.
But imagine if you had AR glasses or something like that, or you had an earpiece that
It's
told you
interesting.
that. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. It sure make life easier.
Yeah.
And if you could have the AI help you before you did a phone call, like you dialing the number and it's telling you a little bit about the company right before you dial it.
Exactly. I know that there's software out there that does the face recognition
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and I've seen some controversy about it.
Yeah.
But literally, you can have glasses on these days where when you're looking at someone, it will literally comb through all the databases that it has and find you information about that person.
That's interesting. Well, regardless, I think you're agreeing with me that even as AI and technology gets better, you should still be good at a cold call.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you intend to do that, you need to become really, really good at reading the room
If you're a business
And,
owner or entrepreneur.
and responding to it in a way that gets everyone on your side.
Well, that's it for this week. Find us at turtlesmith.com and all of our socials, Turtlesmith OK. We'll see you next week.
All right. Take care.
This is always annoying to ask, but if you're liking this content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way for us to get more followers and more people engaged in this great business content. You can also follow us on all socials at Turtlesmith OK and find us at turtlesmith.com.
Please like and subscribe.